It's time for Pure Performance.
Get your stopwatches ready. It's time for Pure Performance with Andy Grabner and Brian Wilson. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another action-packed episode of Pure Performance. I'm Brian Wilson, and with me, as always, is my co-host, Andy Grabner. Hello, Andy.
Hey, Brian. Hi. Thanks for another show. Well, recording, right? We'll see how the show is really turning out, but I think it's going to be good because not only are we distributed again across 3 time zones, leveraging the performance of the networks that connect us all. And in my case, it is actually the AT&T LTE connection from my iPhone, because the hotel I'm in right now, and I'm not going to mention where I am, is not really reliable. So hopefully this will work. But
you're at a conference currently, aren't you?
I'm at a conference. Yeah, I'm at Star West. I'm not at the Star West hotel. I was too cheap for that, and I booked a hotel close by that was a little more affordable. And now I pay the price for it because the Wi-Fi just doesn't work. That's what you get for that. Yeah.
And I see Adam Auerbach is there. He was our guest. If people haven't listened yet, there was a really good digital transformation story, Capital One, with Adam. Have you? And you talked about stalking him and possibly getting him a beer or a glass of wine or something. Have you been able to successfully stalk him?
Not yet. I came in midnight last night, and now it's 7 o'clock in the morning, so I haven't yet had a chance. But I will do this later today. So
okay. You might want to wake him up with a beer.
Maybe.
To show up at his door after this.
It is 5 p.m. somewhere in the world, which reminds me, it should be 5 p.m. in the time zone where our guest speaker is in, right?
Yeah. I don't know time zones well, but it should be close to there. Yeah, I believe it is.
Hey, Finn, are you there?
Hey, I'm there. Nice to have been invited. It's 5:20 p.m. in Germany right now, exactly.
Well, and it's German. You're supposed to have beer at this time. Aren't you supposed to have beer at 5 o'clock?
To be very honest, I wanted to have a beer because, this is just the right thing to relax. But I had too many things to organize right before this call, so I just didn't have the 15 minutes to go and grab some.
Oh my God! Yeah, and it's October too, right? I mean, even though Oktoberfest, it was just done, right? It stops with the 3rd of October, I believe now, or at least the first weekend in October. So I think it's over in Munich.
Exactly. All the joy or the mess, however you want to put it, is over since the last weekend. Yes.
All right.
So, Finn, is it? I'll let Andy pronounce your last name for everybody because I'm sure I will mess it up.
Well, because you would say Lorbeer probably or something like that.
More beer. I was thinking more beer, but yeah.
More beer, yeah. Finn Lorbeer. I hope I got this correctly. I hope I didn't lose my my German accent. But Finn, we two met last year at a German testing conference in Frankfurt, if I remember correctly.
Right, but it was this year. It's only 5 months ago or something.
Fuck, it was this year.
Time goes by, right?
It's amazing. Yeah, it was this year. Yeah, it was early this year. We met in Frankfurt. We had a session back to back in the DevOps track. I believe they actually called it the DevOps track. And you talked about the phenomenal transformation that you actually helped Otto go through. I mean, maybe not the whole transformation, but parts of the transformation. Otto, by the way, for people that are not familiar with who Otto is a very large retail company in Germany, Otto.de, their website. And Finn, you were presenting before me, and I think it was a perfect, I'm not sure who organized the presentations or the schedule, but it felt like a perfect fit. First you with your transformation story, and then I came in with my metrics-driven continuous delivery story. So I thought that was great. And I really enjoyed your talk, first of all, because you are a great presenter and you have a great story to tell. And you're working also for a company that is known for helping a lot of people going through the transformation. And without further ado, I actually would like to let you introduce yourself a little bit more and talk a little bit about yourself.
Okay, yeah. So you know my name. I'm Finn. I'm currently working for Thoughtworks. And Yes, as part of my work, I had the pleasure to join Otto for some time in their digital transformation. Otto is a company that exists since the 50s, never had a real store where they sold things from, always worked with catalogs they sent around, and by now they discovered that you can make some money in the internet and are really trying at the moment really successful to go into the internet and with all their retail. And of course, everybody knows Amazon, so that's a big player in Germany as well. And Otto has to succeed in this transformation in order to stay competitive. And this is where we come in and help since years and hopefully for some longer time. It's really amazing to see how this pretty old company is still very flexible going forward.
I think it's really cool that it's most of the times you hear of the brick and mortar, storefront to digital transformation. This one is a little bit different, right? Because it's catalog to, digital, which there's a lot of parallels between the two, right? Because there's no store actually, but I just thought that was, that's a kind of a cool variation on that transformation. So.
Exactly. To some extent, you could say you're just exchanging the medium on which you're presenting a product in their case.
Mm-hmm. And basically, they already have obviously figured out the distribution in the back. So the distribution, like distributing the products and then dealing with returns and all that stuff, that has already been totally done over decades. But really leveraging the new, as you said, medium from the web, the browser, the mobile device is obviously a cool thing to do.
Before we dive into that, I just wanted to ask, Finn, I think we've only done it once so far. We put Pat Meenan through it, so we have to make sure we do it to some others. We wanted to ask, over the course of everyone's career, there's always at least one of those moments where you kind of think, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that, and how did I get out of that? And in the end, it usually becomes something you learn a great deal from. Was curious if you had a similar sort of experience where, maybe you or did something specifically or were part of something where, you're just like, wow, that was really crazy that we did that. But in the end, something good happened.
Yeah, there was one thinking in the context of what we're going to talk about. I thought about this transformation and how we were to discuss yet another thing of the old processes. And I had a look at the extensive documentation that we were going to review in a meeting. And it was insane. It was so insanely long that I just pasted some David Hasselhoff GIFs that were most colorful somewhere in the documentation, in the official documentation of the company, just to make a point that probably no one is reading it. And then we went into this meeting, and apparently the topic seemed to be more interesting than I anticipated, and all the major executives of the department joined as well. And then the mail opened where all the links were to those places, and I was a bit afraid. I really didn't know how this would end, but I learned that, in fact, people don't read the documentation. So no one there noticed we didn't open the links. We discussed it for 2 hours without looking at it, which just proved the point in the beginning. So maybe I learned that you can still get away with it, but it was a close one, I would say, yes.
I think I know the GIF you're talking about is one of them where it zooms in on the picture of himself on his briefs. And it keeps zooming in infinitely.
Oh, yes, that was one of them. Yes, and then there's another one where he's just sitting in the car screaming. Awesome, yes.
And David Hasselhoff was a big shot, I think, in Europe, right? Especially in Germany and Austria. So I'm not sure. I mean, he was also popular, obviously, in the US. But I think for whatever reason, Knight Rider and Baywatch.
Yeah. But something happened in Germany. I guess his pop music career too. Didn't that really take off over there?
Yes, he was singing "I've Been Looking for Freedom" in the time that the wall came down here. So that was the perfect fit. And he was actually standing on the Berlin Wall when it was teared down, singing this song. And they still invite him for the years when we remember the days to come back and sing. So this is somehow, I think, how we are a bit more attached then.
And he still thinks he was the one that brought the wall down, or is he finally realizing that it was actually somebody else and he was just lucky to be there?
No. It was I think his major part.
Well, cheers to David Hasselhoff. Thank you for tearing down that wall, David.
Yeah. Bring down that wall, or I keep singing.
Yes.
All right, so Andy, you, I know you have a thought pattern for this.
Yep. I do.
For the topic. So let's hear it.
Yeah. So here's the point. Here's the thing. Now you mentioned digital transformation. Otto went through the transformation. And one of the metrics we always hear when we talk about all of these cool examples like Amazon and Facebook and the ones are how many deployments people actually do, these companies do into production. And now it's always about, these are unicorn companies and they started from scratch and everything. It's just so much easier. But now when you did your presentation at the German testing days, you also told us the story, the multi-year transformation that Otto went through. And especially, I think, focusing on the last 1.5 years when you have been part of that transformation project, how you actually went from monthly deployments to, I believe, like 100 deployments per week. And I thought this is phenomenal that you can do something with a traditional software that, you have additional pieces, you need to break it apart. So I would be very interested in getting some background information on how you actually achieved that you were able to deploy up to 100 times a week, which is phenomenal, which is multiple times per day. What it meant from a architecture perspective, from a team structure perspective, from a culture perspective, because there's a lot of things obviously that have to go hand in hand in order to get there. And I would just be very interested in your thoughts and what you typically do in these projects and how to get to achieve this transformation.
Yeah, so to give a bit of background around those numbers, we briefly talked about them already, and I said it's 100 deploys per week. Then I figured that's 100 deploys per team, per best performing team, and I just pulled up the actual numbers of last summer, which were up to almost 300 deploys. Mm-hmm. Wow. So but let's focus on the best performing team, because this is actually where the story takes place. There are 14 teams at Otto, and I was part of one team. And Otto started 4 years ago to build an entirely new webpage because they were at quarterly releases, and the typical problem was there. They had a too big application. They couldn't develop anymore. They couldn't deploy it, and the deploys were very painful and horrible. So they divided the shop into smaller verticals. They started with 4 or 5 verticals, single systems on a service-oriented architecture base, and started developing. And this worked really well. They found more and more verticals, like business domains, that they would spin off, and ended up with 14 maybe by now. So we are talking about 14 teams. And then in one of the older teams where I was in, we figured out that after 4 or 5 years, even in this vertical, we had a big monolith that we could deploy every 1 or 2 or maybe sometimes only 3 days. And that makes then 1 to 2 deploys per week by the beginning of 2014 maybe. And we knew we had to improve there. And then we just applied the same principle of splitting the stuff. And at the same time, all the microservices concepts came up, and we just went with it very successful. We can go into details later on, and increased the deploys while looking at the risk of each deploy and handling all the difficulties people may have with it that are not too familiar with the technology behind it, and that are a bit afraid of pushing blindly to production. And meeting all those concerns and how we could address them and how we could talk about them and where we improved was then the bigger part of work than actually implementing a microservice. And then we went to 200, 300 deploys for the entire department and we made maybe 100 deploys for this team per week.
Cool. Hey, Finn, can you remind me when you talk about department or business unit, I think it was 1 out of 14, at least as far as I remember. I think it would be interesting for our audience from a business perspective. How did the company Otto itself in the very beginning try to break down that big company monolith into individual business units?
The original idea was to find the business unit. The biggest business unit is the basket where you click on the button, where you have the conversion that you would aim for. So this is one of these vertical, one of these business units. Then you have a navigation throughout the shop that is consistent throughout the shop. This is another vertical, if you want. You have a user and user management. You have a product and somehow product management, which is not so much user facing, but to have all the data is a lot of work. And our vertical, my team, was for the personalization, to provide a personalized experience. If you buy this, why don't you buy that? And things like this.
Wow. So that means they took the whole website and basically said, what are the individual pieces or services to make up the whole website? And let's break it into its individual teams. So 14 came out. You named a couple of them. And I think this was done over the last couple of years. And then when you came on board on the personalization team, you realized that even though we are a small team, we can only deploy 2 or 3 times a week, and that's simply not enough.
Exactly. So when I came in, we already started looking into those microservices. We had one big monolith and started thinking about where to create the first microservice. And of course, for just deploying once a week or twice a week, you have a lot of changes in your monoliths that you would deploy in any team. So there was a really big and lengthy process around any deployment. A deployment took 60 to 120 minutes, 1 to 2 hours, and had a lot of manual steps. You needed to have 2 people click specific buttons in a Jenkins interface in order to make a deployment role so that you would know who is responsible for this deployment. It was said how much you have to look on the website, how much design testing you have to do. You would have to document all the test cases and so on and so on. So a lot of process around it. And of course, the initial thought of those people who designed those processes was to apply them for the microservice as well, because they thought from a user perspective only and said the shop doesn't change, the surface doesn't change, all our processes to protect the users should apply still. So all of this process machinery applies for microservices as well. And this was the bigger problem there that I could tackle then, being a test manager in the team, but therefore having access and contact to the other testers at Otto. And then we started talking about general QA concepts instead of the pure testing. And this is how we slowly improved things there.
I wanted to ask, with when you rolled into Otto to help with this deployment, did they have their own tech, IT team that was managing what they, the monolithic application? And if so, did they, what kind of challenges, or not necessarily challenges, but how did the team perform in, as Andy always says, leveling up and maybe, embracing the new style? Were there any kind of challenges that you faced there, or were they already kind of trying to follow, even though they were monolithic, somewhat agile type deployments? Did you face anything on that side?
Yes, so the team, consisting mainly of developers and some business designers, they had a tester to fight against them in the team somehow. That was the setup, because developers only break things and only do bad stuff. That was the perception. So they need someone to control them and to check them. That was the setup. The team tried to go as agile as possible, and the testers were always looking on the process to do it right, to document everything. The team I went into had already 2 that were, let's put it in words, more on the side of the team, going for this agile. However, they had no backup for that in their own testing department. They were always asked to go for these processes, to go for the lengthy stuff, to somehow wrap the waterfall model around the Scrum teams still, and weren't sure how to proceed there. And this is where we then made some advantages to engage in these conversations, to discuss a lot and a long time what a deploy is that is less risky in comparison to a deploy every week, how to mitigate risk that still exists, and how to apply different test methods and automated testing all over instead of a lot of manual clicking through a surface that doesn't even touch the services you want to deploy.
So when Thoughtworks came in, you have multi-years of experience as a company with all the different customers that you helped over the years. Well, I'm just reading the DevOps Handbook, which was co-authored by one of your former colleagues, Jess Humble. I read his biography, and he basically worked for Thoughtworks in the beginning. So when you walk into these companies, and I think you already answered the question that I have, but is the major part in the beginning to actually sit down with them and actually try to figure out what is wrong and broken from a cultural perspective? Like what you said, the ops guy saw that the testing team is kind of like a shield against the evil developers, right? And is that the major work that you have to do from a getting people together and kind of telling them, hey guys, you're a team, you're not enemies. Is that the major part in the beginning where you spend a lot of your time?
That was my personal journey in this endeavor, I would say maybe. In general, we as Thoughtworks, when we came in, that was years ago when Otto asked for help to develop a new software and not release it at once as a big bang, but in slow steps with the alpha, beta 2 release or something like that, and then to deploy continuously. So that was the initial conversations we had. That was more or less purely technical. We come in with more people. We don't just advocate for something and show some presentations how to do things better and then leave again. We come with developers and teams to contribute and to build with them on the product and share by daily activity our culture. So this is how we bring in our culture. And here we had a problem because up until then, Otto would only get developers from Thoughtworks. And the developers had difficulties to reach out to this QA department. And the biggest challenge was just to get one QA staffed so that we could show different ways to the QA department as well and start conversations over there.
So the problem is that even though you infiltrated the dev team in the beginning and brought them a cool new mindset, they then have to fight the battle against the established QA and ops team. Did the management at Otto understand that in order to really become successful, you have to change the whole culture of every team, and therefore you just need to bring external help, like additional guys from Thoughtworks, to also change the mindset of the next team, like what you did with the QA team? Or did the management come up with that idea, or did you propose it to them upon seeing that it was the next major problem?
The original proposal came from two of the Thoughtworks developers in the team that said, this is our major issue at the moment. We don't get somewhere. They didn't have the microservices yet. They had only the monolith, and it all worked. So there was no big need for management to do something yet. That was the original idea. Two of the Thoughtworks developers asked for a QA, and it was luckily me to go in. So the management later picked up when we got more and more services and more of the teams. And when they picked up the trace of this cultural change in the first one or two teams, then we had a big problem because some teams really wanted to go forward and quicker, and some teams were still hesitant about it. They were used to the old processes. They gave them safety. Don't forget that a process that works for 4 years gives you some safety in deployments, which is the most uncomfortable situation people are usually in such a setup. And this gave some friction and some problems. And we then started discussions. And then management saw that there is some need to discuss first of all and to see where the different problems and needs come from. And so over time, they got the hang of it as well. And then we had workshops, then we discussed it, but then people were already aware of the topic. So this just, if you are there and do a very little bit every day, it's a slow progress that you can then enhance more and more. It's not so much the single meetings you have on a single day where you would go out and say, today I achieved something again. I think 2 more people understood how we have to do it in the next year. It's more raising the general awareness every day and then making the people more comfortable with the ideas. And when they are a bit more open to the thing, then discuss how you would actually tackle things and proceed and actually do a lot of deployments and do all the testing and be comfortable that your CSS doesn't break, because that's not an obvious one.
Now, can you tell us a little more about the cultural things that you changed? I mean, what you did is you tried to make the QA team more of a part of the development team, because that's kind of the spirit of Agile, extending it into the other areas, so that if you really become a quote-unquote DevOps feature team, you basically just want to have all the roles within your teams, knowing that it's not only functionality, that the functionality is correct, but also well tested, so they can automatically run it through the pipeline and then deploy it. So what is some of the advice we can give to the audience to say, here are some of the basic things we always do first to get these things closer together?
Yeah, so in general, we didn't go in and say, okay, well, I did in my team go in and say, I'm now part of the team and I will work with you. I won't work against you. And there were some Thoughtworks people already who just smiled and knew how we would proceed from there. And some were, not so sure what this would mean. But then you just go and you work with the people. And of course, as usual, if you work with people, they are much more happy about it. For all the other teams, the teams were solely independent and they had different cultures as well. And I didn't want to inflict anything on them. So the thing was that we just slowly changed our team. We worked with developers. If I work with developers, if I know what developers do while they work, because I talk to them daily, hourly maybe, if I have the time, if I pair with them the entire day, and if we discuss in a test-driven setup, that is one of the assumptions, when we discuss how they write the tests, and if I'm sure that test pyramid, for example, if I know there's a sufficient amount of unit tests, if I know the integration tests are at the right place, and if I know that we just get one or two end-to-end tests on top, and if I know that a development pair will take care of all of this before they finish the story, then I know a big amount about the quality inside this piece of code. And then I don't have to test everything and every edge case in the end. And I have more time to do other things and to spread the culture and to spread exactly this, what I achieved in the team. And then when you start working in this environments and you deploy more, other teams, they want to do the same, and you can tell them, and you can help them as well a bit. And in the end, it's maybe 7 or 8 of the teams are getting more and more in these directions. And then you have a workshop, and we had a workshop, and I just we collected topics, what to talk about in this workshop, and I just put up one sticky note saying, are we only test manager? That was the question then in the end, after we worked with the teams. And then everybody said, oh no, this is not our job description. We do so much more. And then they came up again with it. They said, oh, we do pair a lot. And they said, oh, and we know about the testing pyramid and we coach our teams. And so in the end, we wrote a really nice blog post with a lot of people. And so they somehow then in the end came up with all of those ideas on their own again. And this is, I think, much better than just going there, showing it to them and telling them how it should be, to help them learn. And if you're in a team and you want to get started and you don't know where, this is the typical setup. There's so many things to improve. You never know what. You don't have big trust. Often as a tester, the team, looks at you with some suspicion. I always say that maybe look for the easiest challenge you can find. Not for the biggest impact, but for the easiest and smallest thing to change. And if you change this and improve there, then you will get trust. And then you will trust yourself as well. And then you can change the next bigger thing. And then you have 2 allies and can change the third thing. And then you can go on and do more and more. And by time, improve the overall situation.
I think what you spoke about there is very interesting. Again, coming back to the idea of leveling up, when you have that challenge, no matter what organization you're in, especially if you're on the test side of the team, is always a scarier one, right? Because if the developers start writing in some testing into their deployments, you can quickly look around and say, hey, where am I going to be in a month? Am I going to be needed here anymore? But I love the idea that you mentioned on, you have to go through a major change, right? And you have to change your processes and change your way of thinking. And instead of trying to tackle the whole thing at once, bite off that easy piece, right? That shows that you're going to, number one, it's going to show that you're ready to make progress and that you're participating in, the new style, but it's also getting you to slowly learn and level up so that when you do, as you were talking about, sit with the developers and check out what they're testing so that you can modify, okay, they're covering components X, Y, and Z in what they're doing. So now I can just concentrate on the last few components that they can't really bake into their test. It automatically sets up that conversation, that workflow, and that cooperation that by nature will help everybody level up in that way. So it sounds like it doesn't become so much of a chore or so much of a stressful point. It just, if you take that mindset of, let me just chip off one little bit at a time, you're going to learn through that process and you're going to automatically level up and do it.
Exactly. And you have to keep in mind that it's what just sounded so easy, take one thing, do the next and the next, and then you're already done, is a process of half a year in a small team and a small software, and was over the course of 1.5 years in this context that we just talked about. But yes, you be eager to learn, and then you'll get there.
It reminds me of a movie. I don't know if any of you saw it. It's a Bill Murray movie called What About Bob? You familiar with that? Any of you two? No.
Nope.
It's
Sorry.
a good one. Anyway, there's a whole bit called Baby Steps. So this guy has a lot of, problems, and he goes to a psychiatrist, and the guy's like, here's a book I wrote, Baby Steps. You put one foot in front of the other and you take baby steps. But,
Thank you.
It's a very good movie, though. You should check it out.
In this project at Otto, all people were in the end all the time talking about baby steps for everything that we did. They were always referencing, and now finally I have to talk to you to get this reference. It's awesome. Thank you.
There you go.
That's fine. I have a follow-up question on this one. So Finn, when you came in, was the biggest challenge in the beginning and the developers were actually accepting the fact that we need to do test-driven development? Did you then play a mentoring role for the developers when you pair with them to help them create initial tests and show them the value of having all these tests, not only unit tests, of course, but you said integration tests and some end-to-end tests? Because, I have a tester background and I see the value of tests, but I really see the value of a developer having tests, because within minutes, I'm as a developer, I get immediate feedback of the code change that I just made if I have to write tests, right? If I execute these tests, I get immediate feedback. And so was it one of your things in the beginning where you had to actually sit down with them and show them, this is how you write tests, this is how you do integration end-to-end tests, and this is how we automate the whole thing? So when you check in something into Jenkins, everything gets executed and you immediately see the feedback. Is this something you taught them as well?
No, not at all. I'm lucky to be in a company where this is one of our core values, now talking about Thoughtworks. So when developing new software, we have, I wouldn't say dogmas, but we have 2 dogmas, which is pair programming and test-driven development, to make sure that we have quick feedback and a minimum code quality and a good knowledge sharing. There are downsides to it as well, but we decided to buy in for the benefits. So this was discussed in the 3.5, 4 years before I joined. Those were fights of other people before me that advocated for this a lot, and that was hugely accepted throughout the organization by time then as well, but that was already in place when I came. So the bigger challenge was to work with my QA team there that I became part of.
So changing the mindset, right? That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned that what you basically did, you applied the same kind of monolith to microservice breakup from Otto from several years ago when they broke up the big thing into individual business unit. You then also broke up your business unit, I think the personalized feature business unit, into smaller microservices. And anything where you as the test team within that organization, did you have a word to say when they created a new architecture, especially when it comes to testability? Did you have a word in that?
So this is now talking in the context of a team. By that time, the team, so I was there for half a year when we discussed what we tackle first and how we take out the first microservices. there was good trust in the team. It was a really good team workings, and we saw ourselves as a real, truly cross-functional team. So every team member had a say in how we cut those services. And I can remember that we had one discussion lasting over 2 days with 8 people. And we deliberately took the time to make sure that we really get it right, because this is something you wouldn't change too fast. But there was nothing special about me or my role, because in this conversation within the team, it was all the team members with equal say in this.
So that's cool, because that means that everyone could chime in and say, hey, this is what we want from an architectural perspective. And every team could say, well, from a development perspective, we have these constraints. From a testing perspective, we need to have good interfaces or contracts that we can use to write our tests again. And I'm sure that the ops part of the team could say, well, if you break up the monolith into microservices, how do we deploy it? Can we automate the whole thing? So you really spent 2 days in figuring out how to break it apart and how to make sure that everyone was comfortable enough with the move.
Exactly, as comfortable as you can get. So at the beginning, we started small with 4 people. Then more and more people got renting in. Then we went into the conference room. Then things got hot, as they usually do. Then you get a crate of beer and you start all over with the discussion, and then you go into the second day. You will, I guess, rarely meet or find a solution that satisfies everyone involved to 100%. So you have to make compromises. And in the end, we decided to go for one of the solutions we had. And we had a lot of discussions later, and the team is up to today, 1 year later, still not sure if it was the right thing. So although we took some time and we were happy to take it, don't overdo it either, and go for 2 weeks, because you will, I guess, never find the best solution in the world.
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing is, that we move ahead and not come to a conclusion. The great thing about being flexible and agile is you try something, and if it doesn't work, you can still change things. But the worst thing is not doing anything because you're not sure what the type of impact it may have.
Yeah, exactly. And just remember to revisit things afterwards. If you take such a decision, go back, maybe make even a date for it, a fixed date, to review what you decided and to see if this was the best option to go forward or if you need to adopt again.
Mm-hmm. So to summarize the whole thing, if I hear this correctly, Otto went through a large transformation over the last couple of years. You came in and were faced with the challenge that even though you had 14 quote-unquote independent operating teams, that the biggest challenge was that within these individual teams you had QA, developers, and operations kind of working on their own and seeing each other more as the enemy, using QA as the buffer in between ops and dev. And I think the biggest transformation, what I like, is that people actually realize that they all work better together. So that means that you brought people together to make sure that they have proper test automation. You brought teams together, and all of them could say that the architecture should be like moving forward with the next iteration or version of the software, so that everybody really had an equal voice and everybody felt they were part of the whole team. And I'm sure from a technical perspective, I'm sure there's a lot of stuff in your blogs as well, like what kind of tools you use and which patterns you use for your microservices, which would be too much for this podcast now. But to conclude, the most important thing is that you want to make sure that people understand they're one team. And yes, they have different roles to play, but in the end, it's one team. I believe we need to communicate, we need to talk, we need to build trust. And with that, you achieve amazing things like what you did. And you went from 2 deployments a week to, I think you said the high-performing team had 100 deployments per week. Is that right?
Exactly. I couldn't summarize it better.
That is one of Andy's great strengths, is his summary skills. I'm going to have to start, Andy, I'm going to have to start getting some kind of like summary music for you when it's the summary time. Yeah. All right, well, we're going to wrap up this episode unless there was any other final thoughts. Finn, was there anything else you wanted to add?
I think I shared a lot. If you want to read on, I can just advertise for the Otto dev blog, dev.otto.de. If you want to read on, there's a lot of English stuff in there, just a few German articles. And for some of the German articles, we provide a translation somewhere else later on.
Okay, and I'll get those links from you specifically, and we'll put them up with the when we publish this podcast, so that people can have a direct link to them from the page. So we're going to continue.
Sorry to cut you off, Brian, but my last word, which also shows again the importance of the cultural change, because you're willing to share your lessons learned with the public, and you're not afraid of sharing what you did, where you failed, where you struggled, and what you did right. So I think this is pretty cool.
Great, and I'll make sure I hide a Hasselhoff link within those links as well. See if anyone clicks through to them. So Finn, we're going to come back with to you in our next episode, right? When we're going to discuss the life cycle of a feature and its feedback loop. And in the meantime, if anybody wants to follow Finn on Twitter, he's at Finn Lorbeer, FINNLORBEER. I am at Emperor Wilson, and Andy is at Grabner Andy. So if you want to follow us, because people like to follow, we're all sheep, right? Please do so, and we will be back in a moment with Finn. Thank you very much, Finn. It was a great story you had there.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. Bye.